What's up, Airsofters? Welcome to another top 10 video. This one, my top 10 favorite AEGs of all time. If you missed our last top 10 ratings of my favorite gas blowback pistols of all time, well, gas pistols of all time, because some of them weren't blowbacks. Check that video out. Before we get started with number 10, see if you can guess what my top number one my top 10 favorite AEG of all time is. And trust me, if you've been watching the channel for any period of time, this should be easy. Don't think too hard. Let's get into it. This is the KWA SR7 AEG. Now, this looks pretty basic for an M4, and this was released at a time when quad rails were kind of the bee's knees in airsoft. And the reason this version, the SR7, was so popular was because of its robust build quality. I mean, this thing has no wobble between the handguard and the receiver, solidly built, excellent internals that could take a LiPo right out of the box without any sort of electronic trigger, and they really weren't all that popular yet in airsoft. So you got a lot of performance. Arguably, it's one of the best AEGs you could get at the time. And for that, you were going to pay a little bit more. Modern KWAs, of course, have more features, honestly better styling, and better gearboxes that give you more variable options like the electronic trigger, variable FPS, and quick change spring guides. But the 2GX gearbox really still kind of shines to me as an ultra reliable, basic gearbox. That's why it's number 10. Coming in at number 9. The ICS SG552, also the SIG 552, and the ICS version of the 552 we no longer carry, and they're getting somewhat hard to find. Since I don't have one in front of me, here's a picture. Let's go ahead and blow that up. As you can see, it's got really classic styling, and if you're familiar with some of my favorite video games growing up, like Counter-Strike, this was a huge, awesome platform in the game. Granted, it wasn't an M4 or an AK, which still seems to translate to being one of the most popular. But the reason the SIG 552, to me, has to be in the top 10 is it gives you a great alternative to the M4 AK decision. It got great performance, and it was solidly built. Of course, the drawbacks were that it didn't have really any rail space except for the top rail that you had to add aftermarket. And the magazines, despite being M4 sized, still had those stupid studs on the sides, and I never saw anybody click them together and use them side by side. So if you have one and you want it to fit in mag pouches, you might consider cutting off those studs and using it like an M4 mag. All right, coming in at number 8, we've got this right here. This is the P90. Now, my favorite would be the Tokyo Marui version of the P90. This one is a Cybergun version, licensed. So if you're a fan of licensed products, you can get the FN licensing on it. For all intents and purposes, they're exactly the same. The gearbox, layout, construction of the polymer, identical. So great buy, and the P90 gives you some distinct advantages, especially in the CQB arena. One, it's super compact, so you can get a ton of barrel length despite its compact size. Yes, the select fire switch does take getting used to. That version 6 gearbox, again, for its time, gave you some distinct advantages of upgradability. It allowed you to get a really fast gearbox with battery fitment in a really compact package, and the addition of the M4 box mag adapter that could hold a ton of BBs and allowed you to throw all those BBs downrange in a CQB arena back when full auto was allowed a lot more easily. Plus, it gave you the ability to wind the mag without having to shift your grip on your aiming arm. I will say, in stock form, the stock magazines are kind of trash. They're hard to use, they really don't feed all that well, and it's hard to find mag pouches that really fit a whole bunch of them. So if you're interested in a P90 and you're at a field that will allow you to use box mags with it, I recommend a field like Battle Lab that allows full auto in CQB. You might want to try out one of these guys. You will not regret it. Next on my list is number 7. Now, number 7 is also one that, sadly, I no longer have, and I personally owned one and it disappeared years ago, and we don't carry them at Evike.com anymore, and they're quite hard to find in the States. But my number 7 is the Tokyo Marui SR16 AEG. It was my first AEG. It was a classic M4 design. It looked incredible, came with accessories, gave you a full stock so you could fit a giant 9.6 volt battery, which at the time was before LiPos were a thing, and it was the best way to get a lot of milliamperage so you could really top out the performance of your AEG. But I will say, ergonomics wise, it kind of started me down the path of my love for the M4 M16 platform, and it will always have a special place in my heart. I will say, the one part of it that I retained to this day, that I still keep in a bin and haven't found a rifle to put it on, is the vertical grip, because it says Knight's Armament. And clearly they had no license for that. Number 6 is my VFC Mark 16, also known as the SCAR, also known as the UGG boot, also known as the most hideous M4 style platform before the Masada was a thing. And the Masada was even uglier. Thank goodness I never bought a Masada.
Oh my God.
If you're unsure why it's called the UGG boot, the UGG boot. There are a couple features of the Mark 16 or SCAR that I really like, not including the fact that you could get a heavy version and a light version for the Mark 17 and Mark 16, you know, the 308 version. But you had a couple barrel lengths to choose from, 2 different colors, tan or black. It had a nice mix of polymer and full metal parts, giving you a nice even weight distribution. I particularly like that the stock was adjustable in multiple ways with a cheek riser, the ability to fold, and the extension on the stock. Now the VFC version was different from some current versions in that it used 2 ring terminals to transfer electricity between the battery compartment in the stock and the gearbox. Depending on who you ask, this system's either terrible or perfect. So if you're looking for one with a wire, there are options available with wires. If you'd rather try your luck with the ring terminal version, get the VFC. Some of the other things I really like about the SCAR platform are its looks. And honestly, if you like the look, it's a great gun. If you don't like the look, buy a Masada. But if you want to update this and bring it into the future, you could always get the PTS Kinetic rail, which gives you some M-LOK accessory attachment points up front. I particularly like that the SCARs have their SCAR flash hider, which gives you the ability to quickly thread on a mock suppressor, which I've done because I extended my barrel way out into the birdcage, and that looks really tacky, and I'm sorry for that. But other than that, I really haven't had to do a lot to this platform. I put on a vertical grip and an ACOG, and it just works. Also interestingly, this is the most quiet of my AEGs, and I haven't done anything to the mock suppressor, so there's that. I will give one word of warning though. If you have to work on these, be prepared to stretch the sides of the polymer lower receiver. You're not breaking it, that's just how it goes together. And be careful with the gears in the select fire switch, because they suck. Well guys, we're halfway through the list at number 5. If you have owned, or if you know anybody that has owned one of these guns, smash that like button and comment below. This is the G&G Combat Machine. The G&G Combat Machine has to be in my top 10 favorites of all time because it was one of the first platforms that opened up Airsoft to an affordable price point that blew up Airsoft popularity and made the sport and hobby more accessible to a much wider range of players. Their lightweight polymer, nylon fiber reinforced bodies meant that younger players could play with them without being fatigued, and they still had a lot of structural rigidity, so you could still put on a ton of attachments. There were versions with rails, there were versions with regular handguards, there were tons of versions with different lengths and different accessories attached to them, different stocks and so on and so forth. But ultimately, the reliability and upgradability of the gearbox, as well as that lightweight, durable platform, meant that you could buy this and continually upgrade it as you got better in Airsoft, giving you a way to continue playing without being burned out or bored. And that's why it's number 5 on my list. Number 4 on my list is a classic, the HK MP5. Now there have been a ton of these through the years, made by a variety of manufacturers. But I'd say the best currently available, and one of the only ones currently available, is the VFC Mark Elite Force MP5. In particular, my favorite is the A4. Thankfully, there are several different options of the MP5, including the A5 with a different stock and the SD6 with a mock suppressed front end. All of the versions feature a full metal upper receiver and a nylon fiber reinforced lower. They're incredibly reliable out of the box, and because it's a version 2 gearbox, they're easily upgraded, which I've done. This is my personal MP5, and I waited for years to get one, partially because I couldn't find a G&G Top Tech, and partially because I wanted to wait until the newest version of the Mark MP5 came out. I was waiting for the one without the 3-round burst. Personally, I didn't find that one all too reliable, so their newest version with their newest gearbox gave me a great way to throw in an EPS upgrade kit. That's our Evike Performance Shop upgrades. Gave me a ton of performance, and to that I added my Midwest Industries M-Lock handguard, which allowed me to throw on a flashlight and a vertical grip, which you can't do in a stock MP5 without tape. And I know you're all wondering how I did this, and I'm not going to tell you.
Oh my God.
It's time for number 3, and I know you keyboard heavy gunners are furiously typing that I've somehow left out light machine guns and saws. Well, shut up. That's what number 3 is for. This is the GNP Stoner Mark 63, or Stoner 63, which is a Mark 23. I'm sure we all get confused. It's a Mark 23, the Stoner 63. Now there are 2 versions available. This one, which we have here, has pick rails on the 3, 6, and 9 for the attachment of accessories like this extendable bipod, and one if you're looking for a more classic Stoner look with just the polymer handguard that surrounds the heat shroud of the barrel. The reason this is my favorite top LMG, but also in my top 10 AEGs, is 1, it looks fantastic with a paint job, and 2, this is one of, until recently, the lightest, most compact saws that you could get. Obviously, featherweights and other polymer saws have made this a little bit obsolete. However, the GNP gearbox in this being a version 2 meant that you could upgrade it and customize it like you could any other M4 platform, and the ergonomics, fit, and finish, its really solid build quality made this a killer on the airsoft field. This was really just one of the first guns that we would always look to take to MILSIM events because it could put down so much fire so quickly, and with the box mag that was compact enough to fit multiple extras on your person as a heavy gunner, meant that you could be an excellent support member of your squad without having to lug around a whole bunch of extra bulky stuff. So if you're looking for a saw or an LMG, the Stoner 63 is a wonderful option and definitely deserves a spot in my top 10 favorites. Number 2 on my top 10 favorite AEGs of all time is this, the EMG Barrett Rec 7. The Barrett Rec 7 happens to be one of my favorite EMG releases of all time. And yes, that includes the Mark 18 that I personally own. I cannot wait to add one of these to my lineup. The awesome tungsten finish that's available, as well as that FDE finish that is oh so smooth. The inclusion of a keyed rail that gives you M-Lock compatibility. It looks super futuristic. The excellent quality Crytek gearbox that has all of the well thought out design features in it that make it a great gearbox out of the box, as well as a stock that fits a wide variety of batteries, gives you a platform that's going to run well and look good for a long time. We recently did a review video on the Barrett Rec 7 series, so if you haven't checked out that video, click that now. We'll put it somewhere. Or just go to our channel, which if you haven't subscribed to, you should subscribe. Because we do fun videos like top 10s all the time. Get to it. Now before we get to my number 1 choice, that looks like 11. Before we get to my number 1 choice, I've got some honorable mentions. They didn't quite make my top 10 list, but they're still worth mentioning. First on my honorable mentions is the G&G M14 SOCOM 16. searchable as the SOC16, SOC16. If you're looking for something that's not an M4 or an AK or G36 or SIG 552, the M14 is a great option. It gives you a ton of barrel length, even in its SOC16 form, and the version 7 gearbox, although it doesn't share all of its parts compatibility with the version 2 and version 3 gearboxes, does give you a great way to get excellent performance, especially with the higher FPS builds, in a gearbox that is somewhat unique in Airsoft. Some people might find the ergonomics a little bit unusual, and that's because the select fire switches are rotating tumbler just behind the breech. But once you get used to it, it's a very comfortable platform that gives you an extendable shoulder rest so that you don't get fatigued while shooting. It looks awesome, and you can live out all of your SWAT fantasies with it. Next on my honorable mentions list is another ICS product, and that's the ICS M4s in general. ICS took some inspiration really early on in the development of their M4s by taking inspiration from the Sistema split gearbox of the PTW and offered a affordable split gearbox to the masses. Yes, it was somewhat proprietary with regard to not being 100% compatible with the TM compatible systems, but the split gearbox gave you a way to do upgrades and maintenance to your gear train without having to remove or worry about the spring, or to have a completely separate upper gearbox shell with a different spring for a different environment, whether you were going to CQB or outdoors. And that is what kind of started the trend toward quick change spring guides, having the ability to change your FPS on the fly. Thankfully, modern ICS gearboxes are a lot more TM compatible, and you'll find a lot easier ways to upgrade them with available parts. However, special place in my heart goes out to the ICS split gearbox. If you haven't used one, check them out. Next on the honorable mentions is the JG MK36, or the G36. This is it. And aside from its non-stellar G36 looks, it was incredibly reliable. You could literally pull one off the shelf, hand it to a customer, and it wouldn't come back. They were so reliable at sub $170 that they made a great starting platform for those not willing to or not interested in going to the M4 AK decision. The G36 was one of those video game guns that was featured in a lot of different video games, so it was really popular in terms of its styling, and that reliability meant that it needs to be an honorable mention. We're almost through my honorable mentions, don't worry. I've got another HK product to throw into the mix, and that's the HK UMP45, or the UMG, depending on which brand you bought it from. I love how the UMP looks. God, it makes me feel like such a SEAL. If I wanted to be a SEAL, I'd totally use the UMP45. Problem is, for Airsoft, there are like 0 effective mag pouch options, and the mags don't feed all that well. And even modern renditions of the UMP UMG are really not great. I love the gun, I just wish they were better. And finally, in the honorable mentions is the Salient Arms Gray from EMG. It's been out for some time now, and I think it has a really revolutionary billet-style design with the jailbreak front end that is so much different from every other quick removable front handguard on the market. It looks cool, it functions well, and the newest versions that come with the Gate Aster MOSFET give you a ton of performance and reliability. If you've never checked out the Gray, there are a ton of lengths, colors, and options available in that lineup, and the ones with the Aster are certainly worth checking out. Well, Airsofters, we've reached number 1. If you haven't done it yet, comment in the section below if you can guess my favorite AEG of all time. Go ahead. All right, everyone ready for the big reveal? My favorite AEG of all time, the AK-47. Who am I kidding? Get this out of here. My favorite AEG of all time is the HK-416. It's the best. It's literally the best. I love this gun. This was my second AEG that I ever owned. Not this one. This is an A5. Sorry, I got lost in the 416. For reference, this is an HK416A5, and it built on the older versions of the 416 in giving you ambidextrous controls, including an ambidextrous bolt release and mag release, a different stock slightly, some different ring mount points, and really weird flip up front sight in the rail. But if you're anything like me, you've already changed out this rail because it's freaking heavy. And speaking of changing the rail, if you intend to swap the rail on the A5, know that the tab that keys the rail into the upper receiver is a different size and shape than older versions of the 416. Just something to be aware of. Let me show you my baby. This is my HK416 AEG. It's been with me for a long time, and it's been through 2 different bodies, one of which was actually sent to me by the guys with at Elite Force, because I am so in love with this platform that I just couldn't stand to have a broken, busted receiver. So they sent me another receiver, and this is the gun as I run it all the time. It's got a mock suppressor, all the accessories you could ever want, including a PEQ that's way overpowered, and I don't have nods, so it's there so that I look cool. This is my favorite platform. It's comfortable, ergonomic, albeit a little bit heavy. And the gearbox, although being a VFC base, gives me a ton of room for upgrades, which I've done. And despite the original VFC gearbox, which in older versions had some questionable features like the self-shimming gears, this one's been fully decked out and customized by my good friend Valley River Arms to really be at the peak of performance. I love this gun, and I encourage you to put as much passion into one of your AEGs as I've put into this one. Do you need to spend as much money? Hell no. But I've kept it forever. And despite years of breaking things and repairing things, it's still my favorite. In fact, I'm curious to see what your guys' favorites are. So comment in the section below with your top favorite AEGs of all time. And do you have an AEG that was one of your first that you've kept for years? What is it? And is it still running? Thanks for tuning into this top 10 video of my favorite AEGs of all time. Remember to check out my top 10 gas-powered pistols of all time. Subscribe to the channel if you like videos like this and you want to catch up on future videos that we do, like other top 10s from other guys here on the team, as well as clicking that bell notification icon to be notified of all of our overviews, reviews, and top 10 videos like this. As always, make sure you're playing hard, playing safe, playing responsibly. We'll see you guys later. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how I did this, but I'm not going to tell you.
Oh my God.